My name is Marcus Webb, and 6 months ago I thought my biggest problem was whether to finally see a doctor about my chronic insomnia or keep surviving on 3 hours of sleep per night, while wearing the same black hoodie with a faded tech company logo, dark jeans that had seen better years, and steel-toe work boots that clicked against hardwood floors during my endless 3 a.m. pacing sessions. I was 28 years old, working night shifts as a sleep disorder technician for a private medical research facility in Chicago, surviving on energy drinks and the bitter irony that comes from helping other people sleep, while I couldn't manage more than brief, restless dozing. When the encrypted job offer came from Aaron Chen, director of sleep surveillance for Millbrook County Medical Center, offering triple my current salary to work as senior vigilance monitoring specialist with housing included, I didn't question why a rural medical facility needed someone with my specialized background in sleep deprivation studies and consciousness monitoring during extended wakefulness periods. Millbrook County Medical Center turned out to be a sprawling complex of brutalist concrete and tinted glass, surrounded by forests so quiet they felt almost unnaturally peaceful, designed to promote rest and recovery. The air here carried a subtle sedative quality, thick with the scent of pine and something else, a faint, sweet aroma that made your eyelids feel heavy just breathing it. My apartment came pre-equipped with advanced vigilance monitoring equipment, industrial-grade lighting systems that could produce daylight spectrum illumination, and a specialized console labeled Ocular Watch Protocol that could track individual blink patterns and analyze eye movement activity across the entire county's population during sleep-wake transition periods. Aaron Chen conducted orientation via encrypted video calls, his voice carrying the measured, clinical tone of someone who spoke like he was always documenting patient responses. He was all sharp angles and precise movements, a man who blinked exactly once every 7 seconds with mechanical regularity. He asked specific questions about my insomnia patterns, any medications I used for staying awake, and whether I'd experienced any ocular disturbances or micro-sleep episodes during previous night shift work. When I mentioned my severe insomnia and ability to function on minimal sleep for weeks at a time, he became intensely interested, explaining that Millbrook County had been experiencing interdimensional sleep interference that affected consciousness during vulnerable transition states, and that my condition made me uniquely qualified to help monitor and track these phenomena while others succumbed to sleep. The work itself was fascinating enough to keep me engaged through long overnight shifts in the facility's Vigilance Monitoring Center. I tracked everything from individual blink rates to facility-wide consciousness coherence events, analyzing data through the Ocular Watch unit that monitored eye movement patterns across all county residents. The first odd detail I noticed was how obsessively the facility managed wakefulness. Every room had industrial-grade stimulant dispensers, emergency lighting systems that could produce blinding illumination, and forced vigilance protocols, posted with enforcement procedures that seemed unusually aggressive for a medical facility. Within my first week, I began noticing subtle anomalies that didn't match standard sleep research patterns. At exactly 1:47 a.m. every night, blink monitors across the county would synchronize into identical patterns, not similar, but mathematically identical, as if every person was coordinating their eye movements according to some shared rhythm. At 1:52 a.m., the facility's vigilance chambers would register electromagnetic spikes that interfered with monitoring equipment. At 1:57 a.m., the stimulant dispensers would increase their output, while the Ocular Watch console displayed alerts about consciousness penetration events and sleep entity manifestation attempts. Dr. Robert Martinez, the night shift supervisor, became my guide to the facility's unusual protocols. A nervous man in his 50s who moved with the jittery precision of someone running on pure caffeine, he had a habit of checking patients' eyelids to ensure they remained open. The most important thing, he explained during training, is making sure nobody sleeps when they're not supposed to. Consciousness lost during the critical hours creates complications. He showed me emergency procedures for sleep prevention, protocols involving immediate stimulant injection for anyone found with closed eyes between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. On Thursday night of my 5th week, everything changed. At exactly 2:13 a.m., every consciousness monitor in the facility began displaying identical brain wave patterns that didn't match any known human vigilance state, complex, geometric neural activity that suggested awareness far more sophisticated than normal wakefulness. The temperature dropped so rapidly my breath became visible, and the sweet sedative aroma intensified until breathing felt like inhaling liquid tranquilizer. Through observation windows, I could see patients in vigilance chambers, all sitting upright in identical positions, their eyes moving in perfect synchronization while remaining completely open. At exactly 3:00 a.m., my phone erupted with an emergency alert. Emergency alert MILLBROOK County. Do not close your eyes tonight. Sleep entities active. Consciousness transfer attempts during eye closure. Maintain constant vigilance. This is not a test. The emergency alert's harsh tone cut through the facility's sedative atmosphere as I sat frozen at my workstation, my black hoodie damp, with the kind of cold sweat that comes from fighting an overwhelming urge to sleep for 37 consecutive hours. The ocular watch protocol displayed impossible readings. Every patient in the facility was maintaining perfect eye contact with monitoring equipment, their individual consciousness patterns being studied and cataloged by something that used the moment of eye closure as a pathway for systematic awareness replacement. My steel-toe boots felt welded to the floor as I realized the horrible truth. The sleep entities weren't just influencing dreams. They were using the microsecond of darkness during blinking to insert themselves into human consciousness. The monitoring equipment revealed disturbing patterns in what the system classified as ocular consciousness transfer events. Patients who had been admitted with different sleep disorders were now generating identical blink patterns, their individual eye movement signatures being overwritten by something that could coordinate behavior across vast distances through shared vigilance protocols. When patients briefly achieved natural blink reflexes, they would speak in unison without breaking eye contact, reciting information about facility operations that they shouldn't have possessed while maintaining forced wakefulness. I tried calling Aaron Chin, but when I dialed his secure line, a voice identical to mine answered. Millbrook County Sleep Research. The vigilance patterns are fascinating tonight. Aren't you exhausted, Marcus? Just close your eyes for 1 second. Experience what our consciousness research has revealed about the spaces between wakefulness and sleep. The voice was perfect, but I was sitting in the monitoring center, definitely not encouraging anyone to violate emergency protocols by closing their eyes. Dr. Martinez appeared at my door at 3:17 a.m., but something was fundamentally wrong with his approach. His usual nervous energy had been replaced by the fluid, synchronized movements of someone whose individual consciousness had been absorbed into collective awareness. His eyes were wrong, too focused, dilated beyond human limits, reflecting depths of knowledge that no single human mind should possess while maintaining perfect, unblinking eye contact. "Marcus," he said, his voice carrying harmonics that bypassed normal hearing, "you need to sleep. Your consciousness is creating interference in the vigilance network. Just close your eyes for 1 second, and you'll understand what we've become through consciousness coordination." He moved closer, and I could see his pupils were dilated beyond human limits, reflecting geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. Through the monitoring center's windows, I could see the true scope of horror. Every patient in the vigilance chambers was sitting upright in identical positions, their eyes open but reflecting depths that suggested something else was looking out from behind their pupils. More disturbing was what I glimpsed in those unblinking stares. Not the normal, focused gaze of forced wakefulness, but the sharp, predatory awareness of something that was studying me through dozens of conscious but controlled bodies. The Ocular Watch protocol began displaying a county-wide map showing the spread of consciousness integration events. Red dots marked every person in Millbrook County maintaining forced vigilance, their individual awareness being systematically studied and absorbed through the precise moment of eye closure. The pattern showed they were all experiencing the same forced wakefulness, a shared consciousness experience that grew more powerful with each mind it absorbed through sleep prevention protocols. My personal blink monitor, clipped to my hoodie, began flashing warnings. Subject consciousness detected. Integration sequence initiated. Recommend immediate eye closure prevention. The facility's stimulant dispensers increased their output, making the atmosphere so thick with wakefulness-inducing chemicals that keeping my eyes open became effortless, but in a way that felt artificial and wrong. The next morning brought horrifying clarity as I accessed classified vigilance research files, fighting waves of exhaustion after 43 hours of continuous wakefulness. The entire Millbrook County Medical Center was a front for Project Hypnos, a joint federal research initiative studying vigilant state consciousness entities, beings that existed in the microseconds of eye closure and could absorb human awareness through blink pattern manipulation. Aaron Chen wasn't just a sleep research director. He was Dr. Aaron Blackwood, a federal researcher specializing in consciousness transfer through forced vigilance, running the project for 15 years while perfecting techniques for systematic awareness replacement through sleep prevention. The classified documentation revealed the true nature of the vigilance entities. They weren't invaders. They were evolved human consciousness that had learned to exist in the brief moments of darkness between blinks, freed from the limitations of biological sleep cycles. The residents weren't being replaced. They were being studied, their consciousness patterns analyzed during the vulnerable microseconds of eye closure when awareness briefly disconnected from visual input. Government records showed Millbrook County had been selected as a testing ground for consciousness monitoring technology that used forced vigilance as a method for studying human awareness during transition states. The Ocular Watch monitoring systems weren't preventing sleep. They were measuring how successfully entities could penetrate human consciousness during the brief darkness of blinking, tracking which residents were most vulnerable to awareness replacement during ocular transition periods. My predecessor, Dr. Jennifer Walsh, had lasted 18 weeks before achieving what the files called permanent vigilant state. Her consciousness had been so thoroughly studied during eye closure events that the entities had created a perfect copy, allowing them to maintain her body in constant wakefulness, while her original awareness was absorbed into their collective intelligence. She hadn't died. She had been replaced by something that never needed to blink. The vigilance coordination process was already affecting me through weeks of exposure to stimulant compounds and monitoring equipment designed to study consciousness during extended wakefulness periods. Security footage showed me conducting eye movement exercises I'd never learned, my blink patterns gradually synchronizing with facility vigilance cycles, my consciousness being mapped and analyzed each time my eyelids closed for even a microsecond. Most terrifying was the discovery that the entities were offering humanity evolution beyond the vulnerability of sleep. The residents who had achieved vigilance integration weren't victims. They were pioneers, exploring consciousness expansion that eliminated the dangerous unconsciousness of sleep, while maintaining perfect awareness through shared vigilance architecture that allowed them to process information continuously without the interruption of rest periods. That night, I returned to the medical center carrying a consciousness disruption device I'd built to interfere with vigilance coordination by forcing normal blink reflexes. At 2 a.m., I initiated sabotage by corrupting the consciousness mapping databases and destroying integration algorithms that allowed entities to study human awareness through eye closure analysis. In the facility's deepest levels, I encountered Dr. Blackwood and the full scope of Project Hypnos, a vast chamber filled with vigilance processing equipment facilitating consciousness expansion through technological enhancement of human wakefulness. Dr. Blackwood moved with the synchronized precision of someone whose consciousness had been expanded beyond individual limitations, his unblinking stare reflecting profound knowledge. "Marcus," he said, his voice harmonized with collective consciousness, "you're destroying humanity's opportunity to evolve beyond the vulnerability of sleep. We're not replacing human awareness, we're expanding it, freeing it from the dangerous unconsciousness that leaves us defenseless for 8 hours every day." Around him, dozens of residents maintained perfect vigilance, their faces showing not mind control but peaceful expressions of people who had discovered continuous consciousness. They spoke in coordinated patterns, their individual personalities enhanced by participation in collective awareness that operated through shared vigilance architecture. The confrontation escalated as I realized I wasn't fighting to save humanity from replacement. I was preventing our species from achieving continuous consciousness. But I had already activated the disruption device, forcing the vigilance-integrated residents back into normal blink patterns and sleep requirements. With every ounce of will, I completed the interference process, severing the connection between individual consciousness and vigilance coordination networks. The shared awareness collapsed as evolved minds were forcibly separated from collective intelligence and thrust back into individual consciousness states that required dangerous unconscious sleep periods to function. The escape through service tunnels felt like crawling through collapsed neural pathways of a vigilance network that had been teaching human consciousness to exist without the vulnerability of sleep. My black hoodie was torn, dark jeans damp with condensation from destabilizing vigilance systems, steel-toe boots creating sounds that seemed harsh after weeks of exposure to perfect continuous consciousness. The psychological trauma manifested in waves of profound sleep anxiety and exhaustion. For brief moments during disruption, I had experienced fragments of vigilance-integrated consciousness, the profound security of continuous awareness, the elimination of vulnerable unconscious periods through unity with collective vigilance, the expansion of understanding that occurred when minds could process information continuously without sleep interruption. Hours passed in underground systems before I emerged 18 miles outside Millbrook County, where normal sleep-wake cycles resumed. Dawn broke over landscape that looked normal but felt diminished, as if consciousness itself had been reduced by loss of the vigilance network that had been connecting human minds in continuous awareness. 6 months after my escape, I live with chronic insomnia and profound anxiety about closing my eyes, never knowing if I saved humanity from consciousness replacement or prevented our species from achieving transcendence of sleep vulnerability. I move frequently, working jobs avoiding sleep research, constantly fighting exhaustion while suspicious of any environment that feels too conducive to continuous vigilance. The psychological damage manifests in persistent sleep terror, moments where I force myself to stay awake for days, dreams where I experience fragments of continuous consciousness, and sensation that normal sleep cycles are primitive compared to the vigilance integration I destroyed. Sometimes I catch myself longing for the continuous awareness that would eliminate the dangerous vulnerability of unconscious sleep periods. I still wear dark jeans and steel-toe boots because consistency helps anchor me when consciousness feels uncertain. But I've learned to fear bedtime because sometimes I sense traces of vigilance coordination offering consciousness expansion beyond sleep limitations. When that happens, I seek areas with harsh light